Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supportive community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. Hi, Healthy Buzz listeners. Before we jump into today's episode, I do need to put out a trigger warning. We are talking about grief, and the main topic associated with grief is death. So we will be talking a lot about death in today's episode, and we are also touching on suicide. So if this feels like a really heavy topic for you and maybe a potentially triggering topic, go ahead and skip this week's episode. Tune in next week instead. And if you're somebody who's struggling with mental health challenges, emotional distress, or just really needs somebody to talk to, don't forget that there is a lifeline available for you. You can either call or text 988 and be connected with a counselor that can help you with navigating your challenges. All right, if you're ready, let's go. Hey, Healthy Buzz community. Have you been curious about using a continuous glucose monitor to unlock powerful insights to your metabolic health? Imagine seeing in real time how your body responds to different meals, different workouts, and also the effects of stress. Now, what if you could experience those benefits without being locked into any type of recurring subscription like some of the other continuous glucose monitor programs out there? With my Blood Sugar Savvy course, you'll get exactly that. You'll receive access to 7 engaging learning modules, 2 continuous glucose monitors to start your wellness journey, plus 4 weekly one-on-one video strategy sessions with me where I'll personally guide you to understanding your CGM data. We'll work together to identify your unique blood sugar patterns and create customized strategies for better energy, mood, and overall well-being. Oh, and by the way, this is especially crucial during your peri- and postmenopausal years. Blood Sugar Savvy is about understanding your body on a deeper level, implementing practical strategies, and gaining sustainable knowledge to support your overall health and wellness. Ready to get Blood Sugar Savvy and take control of your metabolic health? Healthy Buzz listeners can save $30 simply by using the code BUZZ at checkout when you enroll at bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/Blood Sugar Savvy. That's bcw.bcollectivewellness.com/Blood Sugar Savvy. Don't forget to use that code BUZZ at checkout for your $30 savings. Your personalized blood sugar journey starts now. Hi, Healthy Buzz listeners. I am so excited to introduce to you today Tamara Kubacki. She is a certified grief educator, and she is the founder of a business called Listening to Grieve. Listening to Grieve provides empathetic one-on-one grief coaching with storytelling and deep listening as a foundation for coping with loss. Tamara has created and collaborates on public events that encourage communal grieving through creativity, ceremony, movement, and sharing. Her popular grief walks bring people together to grieve in a natural setting. Her expertise has been featured in the Seattle Times and the West Seattle blog. Tamara collaborates with artists, yoga instructors, herbalists, and others to destigmatize grief and to make grieving less lonely. Tamara, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brandy.
So I have a really big and important question for you to start off. Why grief? Tell me a little bit about the journey of how grief played into your life so that all of a sudden you decided to become a grief educator and really help supporting people with the grieving process.
Yeah, I guess it is kind of surprising, isn't it? It's not something that you hear about very often, but I have experienced my own grief. Both of my parents died when I was in my 20s, and because I was in my 20s, I didn't have the tools really to deal with the grief in a healthy way. Mostly I just ignored it. And then my sister died in 2021, and that put me into a deep, deep grief, partly because she's my only sister. She and I were talking every day, multiple times a day. We were each other's companion during the COVID lockdown. And even though it was just on video, because she was in Colorado, when she died, I was bereft. And I found a grief group that supported me and still continues to support me. And then I also found a therapist who gave me some tools to deal with my increasing anxiety and the depression I was feeling after her loss and our move to the Seattle area. My therapist actually said to me one day, "Have you ever thought about being a grief coach?" And I had no idea what a grief coach was. And so I looked into it and thought, well, what can I offer that's different? You know, all these other grief coaches that I was researching, they all had a similar story. Somebody died, they went through a traumatic loss, they found grief coaching as a way to give back and so on. And then I realized that my background is in folklore, folk studies, and I know how to talk to people. I know how to listen to people. And I realized that I could use that skill to give other grievers a space to talk about their loved ones, because that's something as a griever that we long for and don't often have the opportunity to do.
Why do you think that is, that people, I'm making assumptions here, people assume they don't have the opportunity really to express what they're feeling when it comes to grief and like having that relativity to other people? So why do you think there is like that stigma around grief?
Well, I think it's because our society has become increasingly conservative when it comes to expressing emotions. I don't mean conservative in the political sense, of course. You see these like historical movies, say, and you know, you've got the widow dressed in black and all the mourners around the gravesite and usually rain and umbrellas. But, you know, there is a very obvious and open, visible sign that somebody was grieving. And I mean, if you go back farther than that, you know, farther than the funeral home and cemetery, people were grieving in their homes. Often bodies would be laid out in the house and so on. And that moved into funeral parlors, you know, so widows wearing black. And then that started to shift to, you know, you go to a funeral today, you're not expected to wear black. Widows in particular aren't walking around in black clothes all the time to show that they're grieving. So that visual cue was lost. And then with that, we've made talking about it uncomfortable. Hiding it like that, hiding the visible cue, also then made talking about it uncomfortable. And there are other factors, like if I'm talking about my grief, it makes you think of your own grief, or it brings up thoughts of people you might be missing, or it brings up the thought of your own death, because everybody is going to die. So we think, oh my gosh, this person died, I am also going to die. So that makes us feel uncomfortable. So we don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, people like to skirt around the things that make them feel uncomfortable. So if we just ignore it and push it to the side, maybe it will go away.
Right.
So why would you say it is so hard for our brain to even wrap around the idea that somebody is no longer here on earth? They have died, they have passed, they have moved on.
I find this such an interesting question. This is something that I discovered after I was grieving myself. I realized, like, what is happening? I was curious about what happens in our brains and in our bodies when we're grieving. Why do I feel stuck and want to just stay in bed all day? The first time I encountered this was through an article in Scientific American, and they talk about the attachment theory. So think about when you're a baby, and the first thing you learn is that your parent or your caregiver will come back, right? They are in your face, and then they're not in your face. And then they come back to in front of you. And then you learn that not only are they coming in and out of your vision and, you know, and comforting you and feeding you and so on, but they also exist when they're not in front of your vision. So these two things happen. You know that they come back, and you know that they exist. And so your brain is living with these realities, with these facts, their whole life, right? And when they die, your brain doesn't understand that they aren't existing in that space away from you, and that they're not going to come back. Your logical brain knows that, but the brain that established these facts as an infant doesn't understand that they don't exist anymore and that they aren't coming back.
I never thought of it that way, but it is like, I know that this exists without physically seeing it in front of my face every single day. And so then to have that no longer be a true statement, it kind of puts you in this tailspin.
That's part of why you also do things like want to pick up the phone to call your person, right? Because you still think that they're there. Part of you still thinks that they're there. I experienced that with Sarah because we were talking every day on the Marco Polo app, and I would leave my apartment, walk to get coffee, or chai really, and we started calling it Chai Walk Talk because I would watch her Marco Polo and then I would respond to it every morning. And after she died, I would walk out of the apartment and my hand would immediately go to my pocket to do that. It was part routine, but also part because I didn't understand that she wasn't on the other side, that she hadn't made a video for me. So that's something that, one of the sort of effects of that part of grief.
Our brain really likes repetition. It likes pattern. It's like, when I'm in this place, I do this thing, so you had that habit and that routine established with picking up your phone, connecting with your sister. So then when it became like, I can pick up the phone and I can send her a Marco Polo, but I'm not going to get a response back. That could be devastating to have that whole routine no longer exist. So what are some tools that a griever can use to help ease and understand their pain?
Yeah, well, let's talk about those patterns. They're, kind of two situations. There's those patterns that you keep doing, and then there are those patterns that you can't do anymore. Like brushing your teeth just feels so hard. Or for me, it was showering. And that was partly pandemic too, because why shower when you're just at home all the time?
Right, right.
I just found it so hard to get in the shower. I would forget about it, So one of the things you can do, and I imagine this is advice you probably give too, is make small changes, right? Set small goals. So you feel like you can't brush your teeth. Well, what can you do to make it easier to brush your teeth? And that sounds like, I'm sure people are saying like, what? Who doesn't brush their teeth? But it can be really hard to do those basic tasks when you're in a deep grief. So does it mean changing where you put your toothbrush? Does it mean changing to like toothpaste tablets or something because putting the toothpaste on your toothbrush is too hard? Like, find those things that make those daily tasks just a little bit easier. Do you have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning? What is it? Why? Sure, it's because you're really sad and you want to stay in the sadness. But if you feel like you have to get out of bed today, what can you do to make it easier? Can you, put your clothes out from the night before so it's one less decision to make in the morning? So that is something. I have a whole list for you.
Yeah, tell me more.
Yes. And I will say, any mindfulness tools or nervous system regulating tools that you find, research them, Google it. Those will help. So one of the other things that happens when you have a loss, especially a traumatic loss, is that your brain goes into fight or flight mode. And so think about, your state is elevated already. So one of the things that can help is doing the things to bring that elevation down. Like I said, I developed some anxiety. I actually started during the height of COVID and then increased after Sarah died. So learning how to regulate, to bring myself back down into what they call that window of tolerance was actually really hard. And you might need to ask for help, whether it's a professional or somebody else that you trust who can help bring you down. Oh, to go back to the breaking tasks into smaller parts, one of the things somebody told me was run the dishwasher twice. This idea, did you tell me this?
No, I would love to hear more about this.
Yeah, I can't remember who told me. They were like, rinsing the dishes, if that's too hard, put the dishes in the dishwasher all dirty, don't rinse them, and then just run it twice. Like, let the dishwasher do the work, right? So things like that. Another thing is to drink a lot of water. It sounds silly, but you get dehydrated. Think about it. You're crying. Crying is good. It's a good way to regulate your nervous system, but you're also depleting your own resources. So drink lots of water.
Can we talk about crying just real quick?
Yes, I love talking about crying.
Because I did see your newsletter this morning that talked about crying. And by the way, everybody should get on Tamara's newsletter. We'll have a link to that at the end of today's program that you'll be able to sign up on. But I feel like there's such a weird, I don't know, like stereotype around crying, especially when we think about men and crying, about like, oh, we can't show emotion. Crying is a sign of weakness, quote unquote. So like, how do we normalize that it's okay to have these emotions, to show these emotions, and they're going to pop up in the most inopportune times. You're going to have these times that you are like meeting somebody new and you're just overcome with emotion, especially if you're talking about something of a loss. So how can we work through that crying, or what tools, or what do you have suggestions around when it comes to crying?
Yeah, well, it can be uncomfortable. You're in the grocery store and something sparks a memory and you cry and there are all these strangers around. I get it, but I like to try not apologizing and realizing that this is a natural expression of your body trying to regulate, right? And trying to express those feelings that you're having. So I've stopped apologizing. I used to, on this morning walk that I would do, I would sometimes just cry the whole way there. And then when I got to the coffee shop, I would wipe my tears away, because I didn't want to go into the coffee shop all red and, teary-eyed. But I would allow myself, because it was a safe place to do it. I might pass a person or whatever, but nobody was looking at me, and we were staying away from each other because it was still, 2021. And so that's one thing I try, is to not apologize. But also, you can do things to calm yourself down. One of the tools I like is to take your right hand, put it under your left armpit, and then your left hand on your shoulder, your right shoulder, and then just give yourself a squeeze. And you can do this in the grocery store. Just put your basket down, give yourself a little squeeze, and that'll help bring yourself down. Any breathing exercises help. Box breathing has been shown to have lots of benefits. Do it 5 times, and it'll help.
Can you explain what box breathing is for people who may not know?
Sure. It's a pretty simple exercise. You exhale completely, and then you breathe in for 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts, and then breathe out for 4 counts, and hold or rest again for another 4 counts, and just repeat. So it's making like a little box. Up, over, down, over, right? And the over parts are your resting or holding.
Love that. Something also with box breathing that is really important is what it's doing is it's stimulating that vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve runs from our brain all the way through our body. And when we are stimulating that vagus nerve, we are stimulating the parasympathetic system, which is our rest and digest, our calm nervous system, not our fight or flight. That's our sympathetic nervous system. So we want to get out of that state of fight or flight, and so we want to regulate back down, as Tamara was talking about before, into like this window of which the body is feeling, okay, I'm safe. So that box breathing is a wonderful thing to do to help regulate.
Yes.
The way I like to remember this is the sympathetic nervous system is I'm screaming, right? Like I'm in that fight or flight, I'm screaming. So sympathetic, screaming, parasympathetic, I'm not screaming.
Nice.
So the S's go together, sympathetic and screaming. That's how I remember it.
I like that.
So, first of all, I think it's really important, when we should have said this maybe earlier, grief doesn't have to be just the death of somebody. Grief can be the loss of anything. Can you explain a little bit more about that and how that can impact people?
Yeah, that's a great question. Grief, some definitions of it are any major change brings grief, because you have to adjust, right? Like if you move to a new city, you have to adjust to being in a new city, and you've lost, in a way, the old city, the house you were in the people you were around and so on, your routines. And so anytime there's a major shift like that, there's grief. Some people say too that not necessarily all grief has trauma, but all trauma brings grief. Anything that feels like trauma to you will also bring grief. So, things that are obvious are, of course, death, any kind of like relationship loss, whether it's divorce or a breakup or a friendship loss, anything like that, estrangement, pet loss. Pets are so important, and the grief around a pet can feel just as significant as the grief you feel when someone you love dies. But like I said, a job loss, moving, anything like that, anything that's significant to you can bring grief.
And that kind of goes back to before, like the changes in some of these routines is going to be impacted when you have these big changes. So like the move, totally new place, new routines, having to meet new friends, which both Tamara and I have had to do. She moved from San Francisco, I moved from Denver, and like it's exciting, and at the same time we can grieve the loss of those routines that we had before. Same with a job, a partnership, friendships, all of those things can trigger any type of grief, and it's not just always the death or loss of somebody physically.
Yeah, and I'll say you often hear, and it is very true, that grief is lonely. When somebody's died, it's because you don't have that person that you had dreams with, that you had a future with. Like with my sister, you always think of a sibling, or I don't know, not everybody, I suppose. I tend to talk in absolutes like that, and I know that it's not always absolute. But for us, we had been talking about taking a trip together, and now we can't do that. And the last couple trips that we had taken together were stressful, and so I was looking forward to this opportunity to having a really nice trip with her that could sort of repair some of the things that had happened on previous trips, and I'll never have that chance. And moving, I lost a community, and it took me a long time to find friends, and I was depressed. My therapist was like, what? I think you might think about medication. I had no idea that I was depressed, and I put it back to feeling lonely because of my grief. I couldn't talk to my sister about what was going on, and lonely because I didn't have friends. So yeah, that's something that comes with grief. And I want to add to the loneliness and to the tools. There's a grief expert that I follow and adore and have taken classes with. Her name is Megan Riordan Jarvis, and she's developed what she calls the grief mentor method. And it's really simple. It's inquiry, experiment, and adjust. So think about those things that you think might help support you in your grief. Do you think going for a walk every morning would help? Think about it. Mull it around in your mind. You don't have to act on it right away. And then try it out. Experiment. Go for a walk. And then think about, did that work? Does it help me feel supported in my grief? If not, what can I do to make it feel supportive? And if there's nothing, then, chuck it. Try something else. Or think, well, I like going for a walk, but I don't like going alone. Okay, ask someone to go with you. Or I need a destination. Find a coffee shop or something like that. My therapist would tell me about loose connections. Those are the people that you run into and have sort of kind of a relationship with, like a barista who knows your order, right? And so my therapist kept telling me to go to a bakery every day. And she's like, well, maybe not every day. I don't think that's going to work. I think they'll have other consequences that maybe we don't want. But.
So when we're thinking about our friends who are our partners or a family member who maybe is dealing with grief, what is some way that we can show support to the person who is grieving? I know I can have a really hard time with this of how do I come across as authentic? Not the generic, so sorry for your loss. That feels disingenuous to me. There's nothing for me to be sorry about. I didn't do anything that I need to give an apology for that. And then I know sometimes people will be like, well, I just won't say anything and not acknowledge that situation at all. And they'll reach out to me if they need my support. But I think we need to be a little bit more proactive sometimes in this because it's a hard situation. So how can we show support to someone who is grieving?
Yeah. I think acknowledging the grief is okay. It does feel a little bit trite to say so sorry for your loss, but it is acknowledging it, that there is loss. And there are people that it bothers, but it doesn't bother me. One thing is just be there. You don't have to say anything, but acknowledging it just by having your presence around is helpful. Because like I said, grief is lonely. So it's helpful to know that there are people who are thinking about you. After my dad died, it was the first significant loss that I had. And I got cards from people that I don't even know how they found out my dad died. And it meant so much to me just to get this card. Because I was like, oh, these people care. Like this person that I had a class with is thinking about me. And that meant so much. The other thing is, and I do say this in my workshops and grief groups and everything I do in my sort of guiding principles, and that's everyone's loss is their own, unique, and important. So as a supporter, recognize that. I might be grieving my pet loss, and you might think, what, like dogs, they live outside, they're on the farm, or, cats are for chasing mice and not a part of the family. But for me, my pet is a part of the family and brings me great comfort. And now I've lost that. So it's hard. We all have our own biases, but put aside those and think, this is what's important to my griever, or to, the person who's grieving, to my friend. And try not to judge or compare your own loss. It doesn't bother me now. I didn't mention earlier, and I will say now, but my sister died by suicide. And so I often don't share that because it makes people uncomfortable and people judge it. And so putting that aside, putting your beliefs about suicide or say divorce or pet loss to support your griever is the best way to be helpful. This is my don't. Like, I'm going to try not to tell you to don't, even though I said don't judge or don't compare. But my big don't is don't give platitudes. Platitudes hurt. I used to say if somebody told me that everything happens for a reason, I would punch them. Because no. just no. It just doesn't. Don't tell me that.
That doesn't make the situation better. No. That makes the situation feel, it's just so much worse.
Yeah, you can't tell me that, some higher being had a plan that involved my sister taking her own life. Like, that is hurtful to me. Yeah. Just leave the platitudes at home. If they're helpful to you, you can say them in your own mind. Just don't say them out loud. A general rule of thumb is if your sentence begins with at least, then don't say it. At least you can have another baby. What? Don't say that to somebody who's grieving the death of a child or the loss of a pregnancy.
Or like, oh, but you're young. It's okay. You still have time. Oh,
yes.
Please don't.
Please don't. Because you don't know the facts, right? Like, if somebody has a pregnancy loss, it might be because they can never have kids, right? Like, something is wrong. And so you say that, and that just opens that wound right back up. So try to be careful.
Words matter.
Words matter a lot. Which, just a kind of a side note, I think that's a great time to interject that the common guidelines, I guess, these days is to say, when referring to suicide, to say died by suicide or took their own life instead of using the word commit. Like, don't say committed suicide, because that implies a crime or a sin. And suicide is neither of those things.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
We all needed that education, I think.
Yes, it's for those of us who have experienced suicide loss, it's pretty important. And again, if the person who experienced that loss uses those words, that's okay. But when you're talking to me, don't use those words,
Love it. Yep.
Yeah. If you are supporting a griever, offer, but don't expect. So offer, Oh, can I bring by dinner tomorrow? Or do you want to go for a walk? But don't expect the griever to even respond. A nice thing to do is to send a text and say, I'm thinking about you. How was your grief today? Or so on. And then put no need to reply. So they don't feel the pressure of feeling like they also have to take care of you in a way. Which brings me to, how are you? Let me tell you how much I hate those 3 words. How are you? How am I supposed to answer that question? We do it in our regular lives just as habit, right? How are you? Fine. But I'm not fine. I'm not fine, and I don't want to be flip. I want to talk about my sister, or I want to tell you that I am having a really shitty day because my sister died. So, change it up. You could ask me, how's your morning? And that gives me something specific to latch onto. Today I slept in a little. I wanted to get up early, I slept in a little. I still don't have to go in deep, to the reasons, but I can give you a real answer. Whereas if you ask me how I am, I just feel adrift. And I feel like you don't really care about the answer, because we don't. When you say, how are you, to somebody you see on the street, you don't care about their answer.
Right.
It's just the formality. It's just being polite. So that's my own personal thing. If you meet me, don't ask me how I am. Ask me a specific question. And I think a lot of other grievers would appreciate that. I'll just give you one more. One of the nicest things that anyone ever did for me after my sister died was a friend of mine. I was at book club and I hadn't seen her, and everyone else at book club knew, but she didn't know. And I knew I wasn't feeling up to telling her. So I told one of my friends at book club, and I said, you know what, can you please tell Martha I don't feel like I can? And then it kind of came up naturally, and I was in this sort of state of panic because I was like, I can't do it right now. And so my friend took Martha aside, told her. Martha came back into the room and said to me, I'm so sorry, I just learned. Do you have a picture? And oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah. She just cared, She wanted to know who I knew in just that small way. It meant the world. So Martha's probably not going to listen to this because we're not in touch very much. But if she ever does, Martha, I appreciated it so much.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So we just talked about how someone can support a griever, but as a griever, how do you ask for that support? Because I know that can be really challenging. I've reached out to people before and been like, can I help you? Can I bring this? Can I do that? And I know, like you said, don't expect a reply. It can feel overwhelming. But then when do you get to that point that you're like, I do need help?
For the supporter, real quick, just like how are you, asking can I help is too wide open. Come up with something specific. Can we go for a walk? Can I bring you dinner? And that'll help. Then they can say yes or no, or I can't think about this right now. So after my sister died, I had a video call with my friends who were in my book club, and I was like, I'm not going to go. And somebody else told me, you have to go. They called it a spotter. You need a spotter. And they were right. I did. Now, this is the day I found out. So, it's maybe a little extreme. But I got on my book club call late, and I said, does anyone want to go for a walk with me? And, of course, I started crying. And then they all 3 of them came over immediately and took care of me all day long. They didn't leave me alone. And my friend would say, what do you need? And I would say, I don't know. And I think that's what you say as a griever. I don't know. You tell me. I was still in shock at that point. My brain can't make these decisions. I don't know. Or I would say, I'm hungry. And they'd say, what do you want to eat? And I would say, I don't know. I don't know how to make this decision. All I know is that my stomach is rumbling. That's all I can tell you. And it happened later too. My partner, he started coming on my morning walks with me because he knew that I still needed to get that chai every morning, but that it was really hard because I couldn't use Marco Polo with my sister. So he would come with me every morning. And he did that kind of without asking. And I think that's a privilege that a partner can do for you. When we were moving, he would pack up our stuff, but he's not a great packer. And I was just frozen in the enormity of it, of putting things in boxes. And so he would put stuff in a box and then hand it to me to organize, because I could organize that box. It was small enough. I guess it goes back to like breaking things down into those little parts again. Say this is too big. Just telling that to the person who's trying to help you, and then maybe they can help you bring it into a smaller part. And then as a griever, you don't need to take care of anyone else. It's not an obligation. I mean, if you have children, okay, yes, there are things you need to take care of, right?
That's when we ask for the help for sure, to be like, I need somebody here to help with the kids.
Yes.
We need food on the table, laundry. I need help.
I guess that's the other thing too. A lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to bother. As a griever, you're like, I don't want to bother other people. People want to help.
Yes.
It's okay to ask for help. That's, I think, just another societal thing, right? We got to be tough. And when you're grieving, you are not tough. You are prickly and you are tender and everything's overwhelming. Yeah, it's okay to be soft a little bit and tender and prickly. And you don't owe anyone anything. You don't have to continue to be a people pleaser. I mean, that's just a little reminder.
Yeah.
Be demanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's your chance.
Absolutely. I would say too, if you're a very I am very in charge, I know exactly the way things need to be done, it's okay to let somebody else take that role for a minute. You don't always need to be in that role. Somebody else would like that title for a minute. Give them the opportunity to take care of you, to be that person that you can lean on instead of always being the person that everybody else leans on. It's important.
I think the packing the boxes thing is a great example of that, because every other time I've moved, I've been the person directing what happens, what goes where, and what needs to be packed when, and I just couldn't do it. I had to let Brian, my partner, take that part of it because it was too much for me.
Yeah. So let's transition to grief coaching. What are the benefits of working with a grief coach or attending a grief group?
So I like to think of grief coaching as a supplement to therapy. There is some overlap, but I'm not a therapist. I did not go to school to become a therapist. I don't have a license. I am certified in coaching. And so coaches will witness your grief. What I'm here for is to learn about your person, to give you a space to talk about that person without judgment, and then to provide tools that can help you figure out what's supportive for you in your grief. And to sort of get some of the context about what's happening, like we talked about what's going on in the brain, that can be helpful or supportive to a griever to understand, oh, I'm not crazy. I can't come up with words, whatever, because of my grief. Nothing's wrong in my brain. This is normal. So a coach can help with those things to sort of help bring your nervous system back into equilibrium and to give you some context for what's happening, and then tools to process the grief and to keep those memories alive. A grief group has a similar purpose, but it helps you feel less alone, because you are in a group of people who have experienced loss themselves. And so while grief is lonely, you are not alone in your grief. Everybody grieves. One of my favorite quotes comes from Nick Cave, who says, "If we love, we grieve. That's the deal. That's the pact." And so everybody knows this, but we know it in our own ways. And so being in a group, you can listen to how other people are dealing with and talking about their grief. You can share your own grief, and you're just in community, which feels better for a lot of people. Coaching and being in a grief group, not for everybody. You have to find what works for you. But for me, being in a grief group was just paramount to becoming functional, really. Like my first grief groups, I would just cry the whole time. I would cry when other people were talking. I'm like, the minute the video went on, I would start crying. And now when I go into grief group, I go to the same one that I was going to then. And now I take in what other people are saying just as much as what I'm sharing. It's changed, but it's still so supportive for me.
Yeah, it sounds like grief is an evolution. And it's a transformation, and it ebbs and flows and changes. It's like so many things. We want something to be like we grieve and then we're done. There's not a timeline, right? Just like I tell everybody, like there's no, your health and wellness journey is a journey. There's no destination. It sounds like there's no destination for your grief either. You're never going to be like, okay, I'm done. I'm moving on. I'm never going to be sad or cry about that or have memories about that ever again.
Right?
That doesn't, the human body, brain doesn't work that way.
No.
So,
you know, though, as grievers, we feel like, oh my God, I'm going to forget my person. And you hear about people saying like, I can't remember what my mom's laugh was like or her voice. And those things are true. And I think having a grief coach helps keep those memories sort of in the forefront so that you don't feel like you're losing those memories or, you know, sounds or whatever is important to you. I find grief to be really precious. I picture it as a sort of like jewel in my heart, right? I want to protect it because it's taught me so much. And I'm not trying to like be platitude here, but I immediately was changed. You know, I no longer had a sister. I no longer had parents when they died. So I'm not the same person. And physically, you're not the same person. Like literally, science says you are not the same person when somebody dies. Yeah, I think of that grief as something precious and to nurture and protect.
Beautiful. Well, Tamara, this has been really wonderful to connect with you. How can our listeners find you? Where can they go? Do you have stuff online, social media? I know you host here in West Seattle.
Yes. My website is listeningtogrief.com. Easy, just who I am. My Instagram is the same, at listening to grief. If you are in Seattle or around Seattle, can make it to West Seattle, I do regular walks in our parks here, grief walks, and we talk about grief and we read some poetry, learn a little bit of history about the park and how that relates to grief, and do a little bit of light movement. And it's just a way to be in public and grieving in community and nature. I also do a monthly indoors grief group. Both the walk and any grief circle are for any kinds of grief, not just death. Monday nights, I have an in-person grief group for people who have lost somebody who's died. And then I do workshops around West Seattle and elsewhere if I'm invited and have the opportunity. I write a newsletter and a blog. They're very personal. I haven't gotten into that sort of marketing way of blogging and newslettering yet. They're often about my story. So if you want to learn a little bit about me, read my blog or my Instagram.
Awesome. And can everybody find the different events and workshops that you host on your website or on your social media?
Yep.
And if you're in West Seattle, you will see them on the utility pole. She hangs up flyers on the utility poles. This was amazing. Tamara also has put together a list of books that you can check out, of different books that you can listen to or read. So she has a list of your top 10 grief books to help you with your grief journey. Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much, Tamara, for coming on today. And I learned so much. I'm sure all the listeners have learned so much as well. So can't wait to talk to you soon.
Thanks, Brandy. It was fabulous.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.